The first thing that I've noticed in our conversations about this is that you have a reasonably high opinion of Mr. Trump.
Yes, I do.
And why? What's the basis for that?
Well, because of all the good things that he thinks and does.
Welcome to the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig. William, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Well, it is a huge week, not only in election news, but in Leonard Peikoff news more generally. Um, we're going to get into that clip of him talking about endorsing or basically at least voting for President Trump. And but I did want to. We did an episode on efforts to force Leonard Peikoff into a conservatorship, and we just found out, I think yesterday, that the case has been dropped by his daughter Kira. So we wanted to briefly discuss that as well. We'll get into that briefly, and then we'll jump into the Trump and political information and his interview with James Valliant. So,
Right.
go ahead.
We were actually planning a whole different episode on tribalism,
Right.
and we had to drop that because of all this new information coming out in the objectivist world with regards to Peikoff. So we're doing this with a short turnaround time. So we've been cramming, taking notes and pulling up clips and stuff to get this out before the election. So I just want to put that caveat out there in the beginning. This might not necessarily be our fully polished ideas, but we have been working on it. So
Yes.
it's not a complete hot take. It's like a warm take.
See our episode on perfection if you have any questions. No, but seriously, that opening clip was an accompanying piece to Leonard Peikoff's essay on anti-Trumpites for Trump, which was adapted from Rand's 1972 Anti-Nixonites for Nixon. So, but before we jump into that, I just want to, briefly get into the conservatorship news. Kira came out and said, I have an announcement. She filed for conservatorship, but after much thought, she's decided to drop the conservatorship case. And, she says that even though many people in our lives can attest that we previously had a close and loving relationship for 38 years, my father has been convinced, under what I believe is undue influence of his nurse turned wife, that I am a greedy, evil person who doesn't care about him and only wants his money. Nothing could be further from the truth. And then she says, even if I were to prevail at trial, so much damage has been done that it would amount to a Pyrrhic victory. And I'm glad she's come to see that. Um, I do think, she got some bad advice to pursue this case. And I'm glad she ended up thinking better of it and realizing this. She goes on to say, if he is not able to understand what should be obvious, that I'm trying to protect him, I do not wish to put him through a prolonged legal battle at this stage of his life. So that's
Well,
something.
I don't know what sort of advice she got in pursuing this case. I think, we probably shouldn't speculate too much about that because we don't really know, and we actually have some evidence secondhand from someone we know who's talked to Kira, and apparently she did this on her own. I mean, she took the initiative, and it was her decision to do this. So I trust that. I think that it's up to her. I sympathize with her making this very difficult decision. I have elderly parents and I've dealt with elderly grandmother. So I kind of know what goes on in the end stages of life, and when they start losing their mental functions. And I can sympathize with this. So I think that it's just a difficult situation she made, and it could go either way. I mean, you know, personally, I might have pursued it a little further and gone to court because I think it's crucial to look after someone if you do think that they're mentally incapacitated or they're under undue influence, then someone has to try to protect them. But it's also a problem, if you think that you're just not going to win, maybe because Leonard married Grace, it's going to be a tougher uphill battle, to win in court. So maybe she's getting some really good advice and saying, look, you're not going to win or something like that. I
Right. Well,
don't know.
even if she wasn't given bad advice, it was just a bad decision to start it in the first place, just knowing the character of the man. And honestly, from these videos that have come out defending himself that we talked about, and even this latest election one, that he's not in some babbling state, even if he maybe was for a short time a year ago. And I mean, you talk about protecting Leonard Peikoff. That was the name of James Valliant's group that he created. And, he came in and, I mean, he has an intense personal loyalty to Leonard. And I would think that includes whether or not, he was actually competent. James made the decision that he was. He defended him, and frankly, he won.
Well, they didn't win a case. I mean, the case was
Right.
dropped. So
Right. But that is not, just realizing that it wasn't the way to go. It was, I mean, it was at least partially Valiant's campaign that stirred up public reaction against Kira.
well, it was Leonard's letter. It
Right.
wasn't really Valiant wasn't really getting too heavily involved in the public face of it. He was just, doing the GoFundMe campaign. That was pretty much the extent of it, right? Even in the first video, he didn't even ask Leonard about the conservatorship or what was going on. It's like, he just ignored it. And I think there could be other reasons for why he didn't get involved in that. So, but I don't want to get into all the details right now because we're getting a flood of information from witnesses on Facebook and through our YouTube channel. And just right now, I see there's a comment from Kira on our page. So I think it's best for us to take a step back and absorb all the new information coming in and maybe do another episode on this situation sometime in the future once we've formed our more mature thoughts.
Absolutely. I'm totally willing to do that. And we will have a broader discussion of this as more information becomes available, maybe even with eyewitnesses on the, in the matter. But, and this Valiant has been around for the political side as well. I mean, what I I should disclose this. I got into basically, where Valiant blocked me a year ago, what I consider to be over politics, and I thought he leaned left. So I've been amazed to see that, it was partially these conversations with Leonard that make him in the interview seem like he's objective at the very least, even if he disagrees, because of his intense personal respect for Peikoff.
Well, I do appreciate James getting Leonard back into the limelight. It's a breath of fresh air, I think, to hear Leonard's opinion on the election, especially. And we have James to thank for that. So that's one positive thing I can say for him, is that he is making an effort to bring Leonard into the conversation. And I'm sure glad we're getting some objectivists at the top, in favor of Trump, because it's really depressing listening to, other people like Yaron who don't seem to really know what they're doing and just are actually coming out against voting almost. When I remember reading this just a day or two ago when Ayn Rand was talking about the Nixon versus McGovern election. She was saying how crucial it was to vote in this election because you're standing up for Western civilization. And I think we're seeing a similar situation in this election where Harris represents like almost the end of our civilization. She's just anti the West. And so Trump represents just like Nixon, he's kind of a flawed proponent of Western civilization or America. And so this election is a stark contrast between someone who's in favor of America and someone who's coming from the side that wants to destroy America.
Well,
And I think that's the way it should be framed, is that there's one guy who's obviously good, and then he's against the enemy of America.
I understand that view. I think what you'll see is the people at ARI that are leaning towards Harris see it the opposite way, that she's a normal kind of bad Democrat, whereas Trump is the end of America, I think was Yaron's point. So, that's out there. And, I try to I want to be realistic in what's going on. I mean, even if Kamala wins, I mean, we're not just going to go away over 4 years. Like, the last 4 years with Biden have been terrible, and it's going to be bad. But Elon Musk is still out there, and there's other people ready to pick up the baton. But believe me, I understand it's going to be bad. That's why I'm backing Trump. That's why I can't understand objectivists and Ayn Rand fans that don't even see it the other way. But let's get into the essay a little bit. I know you have a little bit of an issue with the title.
Yeah, I appreciate Leonard, and he's making some good points, but I think a lot of the points he's making are pretty derivative of what we've been hearing from just pro-Trump news outlets or even Trump himself. So there's not a whole lot in the article that I think is like fresh or specific to an objectivist take. And one problem with it I want to point out is that he's adapting Ayn Rand's attitude in the Nixon versus McGovern election, where she called herself an anti-Nixonite for Nixon. So now Leonard titled his new piece "Anti-Trumpites for Trump," but I think that's just a derivative of what Rand was doing, so it's not really that original.
He's
And on top of
alluding
that,
to it. Yeah.
and but it's a mistake, because on top of that, his article is about how much he likes Trump. He thinks Trump has a spine, and he says Trump isn't like Nixon. He's not a Me Tooer. And also, the general content of the article is pro-Trump. It's like how good Trump is. And he lists several points, of all the good things Trump has done. He says Trump is a fighter. He's going to, have a backbone, and he'll stand up to the enemy. So I think it should have been called pro-Trump for Trump, or pro-Trumpite for Trump. Or something.
and
It's not, the content doesn't match his title. So I think that's a problem in itself, and a good editor would have caught that.
I think he's trying to say that he's not fully endorsing Trump as a human being to vote for him as the better choice. And it's in that sense. He does say that, Harris is worse than McGovern and that Trump is much better than Nixon.
Yeah, but he also says, how in the video, which we haven't got to yet, but he'll say in the video, how can you not like Trump? It's like he's totally on board with Trump as a person. He's not like Trump is a bad guy or like terrible, and so he's the only thing we have. He's like saying a lot of good things about Trump. So he doesn't have, and like in the article, he begins, people who don't suffer from TDS will agree that Trump.
Yeah, that's the first line.
Yeah, the Trump presidency had a lot of successes. So the theme of the article is how good Trump is. And so it's the title of the article doesn't make any sense.
Well, all right. So we'll say the title should be changed. But yes, getting to Peikoff's first line, that people not affected by TDS agree Trump's presidency achieved notable successes. And I just remember a couple of years ago when Yaron and Greg Salmieri were talking about TDS, perhaps for absolution, but Greg told Yaron that he thinks it's an anti-concept. So
Yeah.
I guess it's
Well, because they think we're using it as a distraction from answering their questions or telling them how much we hate Trump. It's like but you could use that. You could use any concept to say that to as a distraction. Like
right.
I don't have to say you suffer from TDS to distract you from not answering your questions. I could just say you're a dumbass. I'm not going to answer your questions or something like that. It's a, they're not they're not recognizing the way we're using TDS or what it
Yeah.
means, and
I
like the
mean,
specific examples that have been given. How they exaggerate Trump as Hitler, or how they exaggerate Trump as this buffoon, or like they're all over the place when they
yeah.
try to describe Trump and then exaggerate.
I
And
see there's two types of TDS, and you don't always like me getting into motives, but it's just generalizing. And the left, obviously, they're in that Bush is Hitler camp, and then you've got these never Trumpers from the Dispatch and the Bulwark, and like Jonah Goldberg and Bill Kristol, and there's kind of a pattern to them. They were these like highfalutin intellectual gentlemen who were talked a good game, but never wanted to fight as the Dems started politicizing everything. And I think they were obsessed with staying welcome on the DC cocktail circuit, that their motive became more about sneering at their base to survive among their liberal friends. And no one wants to admit that caving to a woke mob is their motive. So often they'll start amplifying every bad thing that Trump did to make themselves believe that it was their own idea to hate Trump so much. And it comes off as deranged to us when they're mostly just hiding their political cowardice.
yeah,
That's how I see
yeah, I mean,
TDS.
the whole TDS thing we've done. I think didn't we do an episode on this already? And it's been
We've talked
discussed,
about it. I don't know if we've done the episode just on TDS.
right?
But it's a
But what?
vindication of us that Peikoff acknowledges it's a real thing.
Yeah, because he's not an idiot. I mean, he recognizes that people, are just completely, go crazy when they start dealing with Trump. Like they can't handle it. They can't handle his popularity. They can't handle what he actually says and does, because they're firmly with the establishment. They have no sympathy for someone who's fighting against the socialist threat. And
And not
here we
only
are.
that, but he makes them look weak by comparison.
Yeah, they're the appeasers. They're virtue. A lot of the times, I think they're just virtue signaling to the left because they want to have debates with socialists and try to convince them, and so they got to get in the room with the left, and they can't do that if they're buddying up to Trump because then they won't be taken seriously.
Right.
So, so there's some element of that. I wouldn't accuse all objectivists or Rand fans of that. I think some are more
Just the vast
level-headed.
majority.
Yeah, some are level-headed, and occasionally you run across one who has, legitimate gripes against Trump, and I'm fine with that. I have gripes with Trump, but I just don't air them all the time. I don't feel the need to begin my conversations with a litany of things I dislike about Trump. If I want Trump to be victorious, I'm going to tell you why you should support him. I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot, by beginning with things I don't like about him. You say, look,
Yeah.
maybe you don't know this about Trump, or look at the positives. I'm trying to persuade them and turn their perspective around.
Well, I want to focus some on Peikoff's 8 specific points in favor of Trump.
Sure.
Number one, he's pro-capitalism, at least as he understands it. This is Peikoff talking about Trump. And in most respects, he embodies the better elements of standard Republicans, such as limited government, income tax cuts on individuals and businesses, policy of deregulation, etc.
Yeah, so this is a pretty standard fare. This was the case in 2016 even. Trump was the guy who is a semi-capitalist. He's got that capitalist vein in him, even if he doesn't understand it the way objectivists understand it.
But that is not what we're told. We're told that he is just a big government Republican, no different than the left. He wants industrial policy.
Yeah, well, what I usually hear is that he's for tariffs, and that's the big no-no.
Right.
People will hyper focus on some element of his foreign policy or his tax system, or like regulations or whatever, and then they'll say, look how bad he is. He doesn't understand capitalism. He doesn't understand the free market. He's not pro free markets, but they don't look at, the fact that he's a complex guy who doesn't understand everything the way Rand understood it. He's not an intellectual. That's one thing I agree with, that he's not an intellectual, but I think he is a good leader. He'll surround himself with decent people, and he will be primarily pro-America, America first, and his economic plan will reflect that.
And
It's
it's
not going to be
comparative. How capitalist is he compared to Kamala Harris? And don't just tell me it's 50-50 exactly the same. That's just moral sloppiness, moral equivalence.
Harris is a puppet. So Harris is going to mimic whatever she hears from the deep left. She's going to have to keep her base of support. So she's going to be woke. She's going to be socialist. This is going to be the trend of her administration, is just going full bore towards wokeness and socialism, environmentalism, whatever the left wants her to do. That's what she's going to do. Okay, but
Trump energy policy can be summed up by his loud Trumpian pro-industry cry, drill, baby, drill. Three, I mean, that's obvious. He would seek to.
His energy policy is another obvious one. But I guess it's an important one because he is pro-industry, and I remember him meeting with the leaders in certain industries like fishing in Maine and the oil industries, and he would meet with them to see what they needed. That's a real leader. He's not just dictating from on high. He's listening to the actual businessmen and captains of industry to figure out what they need to survive and flourish. And that's
what he's done with the tech guys, and like expanding nuclear and saying that we need to double energy production in this country. It's beyond just oil.
Exactly.
So, three, he would reintroduce justice to our penal system and most likely move to neutralize Soros prosecutors. God, it's so great for someone in the movement to be bringing up the problem of Soros prosecutors.
Exactly. So that's another kind of obvious one. We're suffering under the new form of social justice,
Lawfare.
where they release lawfare against Trump, and then releasing thieves in California. They don't prosecute them here. So I like that. I mean, all of these I like.
Yeah.
I think Peikoff is generating this list of things that are positive for Trump, and they're pretty much undeniable.
Absolutely. He advocates no reforms that would destroy America's constitutional system or the nature of the Supreme Court. It's a reference to Kamala packing the court. Number
Packing
5.
the court, and also getting rid of the electoral system. I hear that from just like people in my family. They're talking about, wouldn't it be great if we get rid of the electoral system?
Yeah.
They don't understand the reason for it or why it's great.
Therefore, I mean, it actually is part of the separation of powers that the founders picked up from Montesquieu. And they just, this unlimited democracy is what they're moving towards. And I've even heard Democrats talk about it. But I mean, look, the bottom line is if you want the Democrats to win, you want it to be a popular vote because, they've flooded the cities, and they would win probably every time that way.
Yeah, it's all part of the left's trying to not only just destroy the American system, but move us towards a form of pure democracy. And then they'll probably get rid of any standards for voting, and you'll have all the illegal immigrants anyone who's here and is breathing can vote.
Yeah. And, they don't always seem like they're committed to stopping non-citizens from voting either. But we'll move on. Number 5 is just about, Iran and Biden working to protect Iran. And Trump has promised to blow America to smithereens should they threaten America.
Well,
But
Biden's foreign policy, the Biden-Harris foreign policy, is a joke, and it's just demeaning towards America. So I think one of Peikoff's points here is that America first is the political version of egoism. It's like us first, me first. So
right,
I think that's
America first.
Yeah, I think it's a good insight, and it shows that even if the Republicans don't, or Trump doesn't identify it as egoism, he kind of gets the sense of what's good for America, and in practice, he's actually achieving some element of an egoistic policy.
And again, comparatively, it's not even close.
Right. So, so that's one of my more general points, is that while I like the list of positives for Trump, I think it's unnecessary, because you should take the general view and just show how Trump is like semi-pro-America, while Harris is like anti-America. It's just like when Rand was talking about Nixon versus McGovern, she did go into some details, but her general take was that Nixon is a flawed pro-America person, and McGovern is just the destroyer of America. And so it's that simple.
I mean,
if you can't see that, how are pointing out the details gonna persuade someone? I mean, it's like a concrete, obvious thing.
I get that. People just like to see the argument. If I have a complaint, it's that it's coming out days before the 2024 election. I mean, this could have come out in 2016 or even 2020. I mean, versus Hillary or Biden. It's the same basic principles, because the Democrats aren't really changing their policies that much. So
yeah, it's the same. So in terms of the two parties, it's the same thing. But in terms of specifically Trump versus Harris, the tact I would take is that Trump is just like a normal human being. He's like, you can relate to him as a human being, whereas Harris is a step removed from a human being. You can't relate to her. She's got this cackle that doesn't make sense. She laughs at all the wrong places. She's like this. I refer to her on my Facebook, I think, as a first generation android who doesn't understand humor and laughs at all the inappropriate moments. It's like, she's ridiculous.
Walls might call her weird.
She's not qualified in any sense of the term. She's not a leader. She's a puppet. She doesn't have a backbone. She caves to the left. It's just, there's so many general things wrong with her character that it's not even close to me. It's like, I look at Trump. He does a 3-hour podcast with Joe Rogan. They have a great conversation. He's got humor. He can relate to the questions, and he weaves in and out of answering the question, but he eventually will get back to the answer. So it's like, he can answer questions. He knows what he's talking about. Harris can't answer questions. She laughs inappropriately, probably to disguise her ignorance, or some more nefarious reason. She's not relatable to a normal human being.
Well, we're going to find out whether it's enough in a couple of days. But just getting back to this list, this number 6 is the one I've really been wanting to get to. Peikoff says, today, wokeism teaches that merit is a racist concept. Objectivity is oppression, and logic and mathematics are examples of white supremacy. The woke universe resembles a dystopia, a world in which the individual's mind is helpless, and words like boy and girl and male and female become unintelligible, and the use of pronouns a political debate. Trump opposes all things woke. He opposes the left's rewriting of American history, DEI hiring practices, biological men playing in women's sports, the instruction of elementary school children in unconventional sex positions, and the push to permit transgender surgery on children. And that has been my main issue. It's like woke is a religion that is taking over the institutions. And he sees that versus the kind of left-leaning part of the liberty movement that says, oh, woke is in retreat, and they've been saying that for years. Don't worry about any of this stuff. You can just have AI write your DEI statement for you.
Yeah, there's a lot of evasion when it comes to dealing with the woke. It's almost like they're afraid to deal with it.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know.
easier to punch right.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to speculate on specific, motives for doing it. It could be that they're virtue signaling. It could be they actually believe some of this stuff, or it could be they're just afraid, to deal with it. I think some of it has to do with them thinking they don't know how to argue against it, and so they're afraid that they're wrong, or they're afraid they're gonna fail and look bad in
Yeah, well,
public.
they don't want to be considered, oh, you're one of those conservatives that we've dismissed from the elite social circles. And it's second-handed. You'll start to conform to make sure you're not considered crazy, whether it's holding back your views that climate change is a hoax, or deciding that Trump is the devil.
One of the worst motives, which was on full display with Yaron, is that he wants to be polite. When he deals with like a transgender type person who's a male trying to pretend like he's a female, and he has a close relationship with that person, he'll choose politeness over reality. And so that kind of infects his attitude towards this issue.
I mean, I know you look at it that way. I'm not have a problem with politeness to someone who's being polite to you. At Jordan Peterson, this came up when he first got in trouble for saying he wasn't going to use trans pronouns, and he even said, he might if they were respectful and nice about it, but sometimes it's just about the attitude and this demanding that I do, and it's a crime to misgender. And I mean, that's I'm just like, I'm not even going to try to work with a person like that. But I'm,
it's very, very complex, I guess, is the only word I can think of. It's like, so when you're in a private situation, and maybe you don't know someone's gender, but they're presenting as female, and you use the pronoun she, that's because you don't know, right? You don't know what the proper pronoun is. You might not even suspect. But when you know, and then you have to consciously, lie to yourself, that's a whole nother situation. And then on top of that, when you take it public and then start using the wrong pronoun in public, well, then you look like an idiot. And so people start losing respect for you because, you're just lying, and you can't gain a whole audience's trust if you're just clearly lying about something.
Well, we've done a show on that. We've had a trans person on, so maybe we'll talk about that one some more as well. But I do think even Peikoff's evolved on it. He seemed a little more benevolent about it. But number 7 is, again, this one could be number 1. Unlike most of the spineless Republicans of the past, Trump will not shrink from a battle. In the words of columnist Dan McLaughlin, Trump brand is a guy you might not like or admire, but he won't hold back, and he's never afraid to go there. Trump is a fighter, and he can act as a man of principle, even if he often cannot state the principle philosophically. I mean,
yeah, you just quoted the part that I like the best, I think, is that he can act as a man of principle, even if he often cannot state the principle philosophically. So that means he's he's kind of absorbed the American sense of life, and he kind of lives it in his own way, even if he doesn't understand everything about it. I mean, he's living, a life of at least a fighter who's standing up for what he's chosen to believe in. Now, I think he's had a past of bullshitting and doing it to like promote himself, and so he doesn't have the best past in terms of acting on principle. But I think since he's gotten older, we've seen more of an attempt to at least put America first and surround himself with knowledgeable people who will give him good advice. And
Right.
he clearly, when necessary, can stand up for America. And some of his humor, I think, might be inappropriate when he deals with foreign leaders, like maybe calling North Korea the Rocket Man. I mean, maybe he shouldn't have gone that route, but he's humorous. Like he's at least trying to use his full personality when he's president
Sure.
and make the best decisions he can make. And so I like this point, and I agree. This point alone could put him above Harris. Because
Yeah,
Harris
I
is
mean, but even
just
any
a
other
couple.
Republican, because if you're not willing to fight, the rest is all talk anyway. Because the Democrats aren't going to give you jack squat without trying to stop you.
Yeah, and it's probably why he's risen to the top of the Republican Party, because he's the only one there who's actually going to put everything on the table
Right.
to fight you.
It
And
was the context of the McCain and Romney sellouts. John Boehner crying to Congress. I mean, it was ridiculous. There was a vacuum, and Trump filled it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of objectivists mistake this kind of like a harsh, aggressive, masculine attitude. They attribute it to something vile or vicious, and they think, oh, this is like a dictator. This is how a dictator acts.
Yeah, well, they
Well,
call him a pragmatist. That he has no principles, unlike what Peikoff says.
yeah, and I think it's a mistake because first of all, there are checks in our system against a dictator. The president isn't all powerful, and he's never going to be all powerful unless Congress radically changes the system or the Supreme Court radically changes the system. And that's not Trump. That's not something Trump wants to do, which was a point Peikoff gave in number 4. He's not going to reform the system to destroy the Constitution or the Supreme Court. That's what Harris and her ilk want to do.
Just having a president that the bureaucracy doesn't approve of is a way of getting checks and balances back.
Yeah, they want. They're more constitutionalists. They actually want the Constitution to function, and they hate it when the left starts introducing things that undermine the Constitution.
Right.
So
Yeah, they've come out against free speech lately. I mean, they're practically running on it. But just getting back to point 8, the final one, it's that Trump's convictions don't rest on being a religionist type of Republican. He even brings up, that Trump supports IVF. So, he does go into some negatives after that. But he really, I think overall, gives an objective judgment of Trump. He may have, felt he was cheated in the election, but in the end, he left office peacefully.
yeah, I mean, his big negatives are that Trump's not an intellectual, which is par for the course, and then Trump's an emotionalist at times. Um, yeah, I can see him, occasionally saying something that he probably shouldn't have said. But that's another one of Peikoff's points, is that even though Trump says stuff he shouldn't say, he usually doesn't act on it. He left office peacefully. He didn't try to stay and become a dictator.
Right.
Um,
The
he,
tariffs too are largely negotiating tactics.
yeah, and that's kind of a thing people understand now about Trump, is that he's gonna bargain, he's gonna haggle, and part of haggling is asking for more than you actually, will settle for.
Mhm.
So but then a lot of people don't get that, and so they think he's out to um, put tariffs on everything, or do something terrible. Um, I can't even think of like what the worst thing Trump could do is. It's like
They say he won't leave office, and I guess he'll rule till he's 90 or something. I don't, it's just ridiculous that people would just sit back and let that happen.
yeah. So
It
the Democrats are gonna sit back and let Trump become a dictator. I mean,
right.
what kind of silly world is that? It's the Democrats who will undermine the system in order to make it so that we don't get a capitalist or pro-American person ever again. That's what's going to happen, and it'll take decades for the Democrats to completely erode the American system, but it'll be harder and harder and harder to vote in anybody like Trump who's like willing to battle them.
To think we have the opportunity for Elon Musk to start ripping apart, government and starting to look for cost cutting ways in a way that, I mean, only he could do with the way he, can build rockets so much faster than everyone else.
Yeah, well,
That's part of the excitement. I don't want to miss out on all that and have it delayed 4 to 8 years or whatever's going to happen when they try to punish him if Trump loses.
yeah,
But
that's indicative of like the type of people that Trump attracts. Trump attracts innovators and people who are smart, like Vivek, and he gets people around him who actually do stuff, and
people willing to challenge the establishment.
they have great ideas. And one of the charges against Trump is that he surrounds himself with sycophants, or like people who just are yes men. But that's not the case. You think Elon Musk is a yes man, or Vivek is a yes man? I mean, these aren't yes men. These are great people, great scientists and intellectuals and business leaders. I mean, I don't know where that charge comes from. It's kind of ridiculous, and it's
They just
clearly
anyone that's not an approved expert, they're going to be risky and dangerous.
well, they are experts. I mean, Elon Musk is an expert.
I
And he's
understand, but they're looking for more Fauci level experts.
they're looking for establishment people,
Exactly.
people who won't challenge the nonprofit status of ARI. Think they're looking to maintain their whatever little status they have.
Well, I do just want to go into the ending, and then we'll play a couple of clips from the Valiant interview. But Peikoff ends, America has changed for the worse since Ayn Rand's time. Between them, the rhinos, and the woke are ruining the country. We are not rhinos. We are roars. Real objectivists for Ayn Rand. Some objectivists claim that if Trump loses, that will cleanse the GOP. I would ask them the following. Who is this Republican who could magically transform the GOP? After 4 or 8 years of Harris, what would be left of the American system, individual rights, freedom of speech, honest elections, etc.? After the Democrats are through with America, America will be through. We will end like ancient Rome. The post-American era will be Dark Ages 2.0. You can say that's hyperbole, but there's a lot of Trump supporters that see it the same way.
Yeah, well, I wish you would go into it more, because I think it is a hard sell when you're saying that Harris is the end of America. What do you mean exactly? So I do see that as a bit of hyperbole, but I do think that in a sense, in the sense of Harris and people controlling her will undermine the system. That's how it's the end of America, is that they will continue to undermine our system until it's floating on top of nothing, and then eventually it's just going to crumble. It'll probably take more riots, more Antifa riots or whatever in the streets to actually destroy the system. But by then it will be full blown civil war. So I think
Yeah.
that must be the sense he means, is that they're going to undermine the system. They have a campaign to do that. We've been watching it over the last several decades. We were watching them undermine the system. We're watching socialists get embedded in White House, in Congress, and they're probably going to get onto the Supreme Court if we let too many Democrat presidents get in. So we just need to be careful about who we're electing, and that's why this election is so important.
Yeah,
And
even though they always say, this is the most important election of our lifetime, it really feels like it this time.
especially, but see, another point I would have liked to have seen from Leonard is that Harris is just completely unqualified. It's like, well, I guess he does say it
Kind
in
of, at least, yeah.
he says that she's the most anti-American progressive that has ever gained the nomination of a major political party in American history. But he doesn't
All right.
he doesn't go into like how she's just absolutely not qualified. No, it's like it's the complete
It's
destruction.
empirical.
It's a complete destruction of what the presidency should be. So if Harris is elected, then you might as well just elect Mickey Mouse next time. It's just anybody could be president.
I mean, that's the way they look at it. They were going to try to run Biden again when he clearly had mental issues. He shouldn't be technically in charge right now, but it lets the technocrats run things. And she's probably promised to keep most of the same technocrats in the next administration. But
the Biden situation, to me, just proves how the Democrats just throw in puppets now. It doesn't matter who they throw in, because
right.
it's going to be the people behind the puppet who controls the system.
Mm-hmm. And it's not part of our Constitution. But I do want to get to this back to the interview that James did to accompany this essay of James Valliant interviewing Leonard Peikoff. And one of the original points that I thought was so crucial, he says that woke is a different version of Marxism.
Kamala Harris once said, I'm all for woke. In recent years, she said, I'm all for woke. We need more woke. We've got to be more woke. What do you think of the woke cultural movement?
Oh, it's awful. It's Marxism with a different version. Marx made it class being exploited, and they just took it to race. And race becomes what class was for the Marxists. And the whole system is against race, and therefore everything that will promote race, just like for Marx, anything that will promote the poor, the workers. So, for instance, DEI, be sure you promote, the race, the relevant, the chosen races, And all of it comes down to, that's why they call anybody who disagrees with them racist, right?
Yeah, that's an example of how twisted the Harris campaign is. I mean, there's this whole vein of wokeness running through her ideas. And I'm not even sure she fully is on board with everything woke, but she will have to be, because that's who her supporters are.
Right, it's
So
where the party is going. It's where the intellectual fire is on the left.
She'll be completely influenced by all the woke people in her cabinet and whatever. So she'll just be a puppet for them, which is a scary thing, because whatever ideas the woke intellectuals come up with, they'll be like automatically implemented in her administration. They'll be like straight shot.
Right.
It won't have to go through Trump's advisors, and Trump's advisors would probably just reject everything woke. But Kamala, she'll just like take it in because she has to. Otherwise, they'll stand outside the White House protesting until she implements their demand.
Well, I get that. I was also fascinated with Leonard talking about woke as a different version of Marxism, because of how explicitly Yaron has expressed a different take on the matter.
Wokeism is not Marxism. I've said this 1,000 times. The modern left is not Marxist. Marxism is too nice of a term to use for them. They're far worse than Marxists.
Well, it sounds like he kind of agrees with Leonard. He just thinks Leonard should have used a more harsh word.
Well, he's trying to say that it's worse, but I mean, I think we've kind of talked about this a little bit because I think Yaron claims that woke isn't Marxist because he's been misusing Peikoff's dim hypothesis as an excuse to never take on the left. He says they're nihilists who can't win long term. But if they're Marxists, then that doesn't apply and we have to fight them.
Well, I think we could nitpick this a little bit. It technically is not Marxism. It's some blending. It's like a new thing. It's a blending between racism and Marxism.
It's open Marxism.
I think Leonard's point, if you give him a charitable interpretation, is that the woke have taken this whole collectivist, anti-capitalist idea and found a way to inject racism into it. So
yeah.
I
don't even think Peikoff needs a charitable explanation. He's right, and Yaron is trying to say they're worse, but he doesn't really mean it if he still wants the Democrats to win.
Yeah, I mean I don't think there's a whole lot of division here between Yaron and Leonard. I think if you just ask, if we were to like have a conversation with them, they'd probably end up agreeing. It is
I don't think so. I think it's a fundamental philosophical difference, to use their term.
Well, they're both against woke, but one seems to use it in practice sometimes.
But when you say woke is in retreat, woke isn't Marxism, woke isn't a threat, you don't see it. I mean, you may pay lip service because you have to, but when you're doing all those things to diminish it, I would argue that Yaron does not totally see the woke threat. That in fact he and all of us are self-censoring for.
What I'd have to review his current position on the woke.
He's been saying it's in retreat for 3 years, ever since he started talking about it.
It's in retreat from what height? It's been.
He pulled out some data saying it had peaked in 2021, and that based on like search terms or something ridiculous like that, or how many companies were had DEI. I don't the criteria, but you can pretty much come up with data to show anything you want. And a way to dismiss things is to say that they're not a threat if you don't want to have to fight it. And I think that's what's going on here. I think it's what's going on with a lot of issues that it's like, what is a bigger threat? I mean, woke or Donald Trump?
Also, I think we need to consider what area of the country you're in, because I'm in California, and just a couple weeks ago my girlfriend was complaining about how she's dealing with this woke nonsense at her work. So like in terms of the DEI stuff. So I think if you're in a certain part of the country, it might be in retreat because you're dealing with Republicans who are combating it. But if you're in other parts of the country, like liberal safe havens or democratic safe havens, then it's getting worse because it's being implemented everywhere. So it could be that this election, we're going to find out like how prevalent the wokeness is. We'll see how many people vote for Kamala versus Trump. It could be that we're seeing a downtrend and that people are wising up to
That's
the
wokeness.
Not
my. I think I just see that as folly. I mean, I just see not only is woke it's the latest incantation of Marxism, the new religion that has been taking over for like 200 years with Christianity and the role of like a declining paganism of the 3rd century.
Yeah, but ideas are accepted volitionally. So let's hope for the best. Let's hope that we're making some good arguments and
Yeah. I
more and
mean,
more.
look, I'm not saying it can't be stopped, but one of the ways to stop it is to acknowledge it as a threat and not just be like, oh yeah, no one's doing that affirmative action stuff anymore. Because I mean that's what the DEI is really.
Well, yeah, I mean, is Yaron saying it's not a threat?
He says it's peaked. He's got the data to prove it.
Okay, well, anti-Semitism peaked probably in the 40s or 50s. So it's been going down, but it's still a threat in some parts of the country or some areas of the world. So you can look at it at different perspectives. It's
Yeah, and my
even if
perspective is
there's,
you call something peaked when you don't want to fight it.
no, you could treat it objectively. You say, look, it was peaked a couple decades ago. We're still battling it. There's still remnants of it.
I'm
Let's
talking
try to,
about woke.
yeah, well, I'm saying it. Woke could have peaked a couple years ago, but then the right wised up and started just launching campaign after campaign against it. And so now it's kind of decreasing in intensity.
I just, once they set up the system of how you have to hire everybody, even if they then come back and say, "Oh, no, you don't have to do that as much anymore." You still know the process that's in there. It hasn't been repudiated and a new merit-based system brought up. Like Peikoff was saying, merit's considered racist.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the theory. That's what they teach.
Yeah, but it wouldn't matter if woke is peaked or I just that's a strong issue of mine because I just think it's a bromide that is used, and I've seen others like even Richard Hanania and people like that use it, and I'm just like that. Those are people that are just not admitting they don't have the stomach for it. We'll
Yeah,
know when it's.
it'd be nice to see some statistics or data on how prevalent it is. But
Oh,
I
I
think we
can guarantee you they can find statistics saying socialism's the best system.
well, someone needs to come up with a method for measuring this problem.
Yeah. Well, in this next clip that I thought was really interesting, Valiant brings up rationalism in objectivists, which can lead to them wanting a perfect candidate.
In our earlier discussions about this, we were talking about rationalism among objectivists
Yeah.
in deciding to vote. And it interests me because, if there is a significant difference in outcomes, even if we do have two imperfect candidates, do you think that imperfection is an abstraction that gets in the way of an objectivist saying, well, I can't vote for Trump because he said such and such or did such and such when the other candidate is so much worse?
Yes,
Well, let me put it this way. Do you think that's being wedded to an abstraction over reality?
Yes. I think it's being wedded to a commandment over reality. The commandment is, thou shalt be moral. And moral does not entail compromises of the good. And therefore, if you vote for somebody who has obvious flaws and obvious imperfections, you are voting for something that is not the good. It's the compromise of the good, which makes it, if not evil, at least very inferior, as against somebody who stands up for their, no, but they don't say that you should vote for Harris. Some of them do, but that's the ones that want to cleanse the Republican Party.
And he addressed that in the essay that, who are you going to cleanse it with? They want Romney back.
Yeah, I don't understand the whole idea of voting against Trump in order to improve the Republican Party. It seems like a complete rationalization for not voting or for voting for Harris. And I think that's a major indication of TDS, that you hate Trump so much that you'd vote for someone who's clearly evil.
Or you're desperate to tell your family and friends that'll cancel you, oh no, I didn't support Trump.
Yeah.
Which is another, that's part of how I define TDS.
It could
It's
be
a
to
reaction.
maintain your relationships, but then that would just be peer pressure or family pressure. And that's just a crude excuse. I mean, how can you can't really argue against that, because by that time, someone's just so far gone that you can't reason with them.
Well,
They're
sometimes
just,
calling it out is the best way to make them think about it. I think it's red pilled some people over the years. They're like, oh, no, this is a line I can't cross. And I mean, we've seen, in some cases, I saw someone apologize to Palmer Luckey for not standing up more when he was canceled like 10 years ago. That's where you start, when people being brave encourages other people to be brave.
well, I mean,
Peikoff.
if they have some sort of intellectual reason for voting, that's one thing. You might be able to reach them. But we're talking about someone who's acting under peer pressure from family or friends, and they just want to maintain their relationships, so they go with the flow and go along to get along. That person's unreachable, I think. I mean, you'd have to develop a friendship with them that's closer than any of their other friends, and then they'd want to maintain their friendship with you, so then they'd vote Trump. They're not intellectual. They don't have any sort of sophisticated political or philosophical reasons. It's all just friendship and family. It's a social reason, you know. So
Yeah, well, it's also because it's the left that puts that kind of pressure on you, like, hey, we're not going to let you see the grandkids, or we won't be nice to you at Thanksgiving, or I'm not saying there are no Republicans that are like that, but I think if the left wanted peace, there would be peace. Same with the Palestinians. So
yeah.
getting
But I was also going to say that I think this whole rationalism issue, it it might relate to sanctioning candidate, because I think a lot of objectivists believe that if they vote for Trump, it's a moral sanction of Trump.
right.
I think that's a mistake, and that's the rationalistic element that I think Leonard was kind of getting at, is that they don't believe in compromises, and so if you associate with Trump or give him your vote, then you're supporting him, and then that's a compromise of your values, and so now you're being immoral. But that's a whole mishmash of ideas, and I think that when you just look at what a vote means, it just means that you prefer one candidate over the other. You think one candidate will be better than the other as a president, and that's all it has to mean. It doesn't have to mean that you think everything he does is great, or even that you think he's a good person. Um, it could mean, like Rand thought of Nixon, that he's a flawed supporter of
Yeah.
America or of
And it's like
civilization.
Peikoff is coming out of retirement to say that to people, to say, don't get caught up in these perfect rationalistic fantasies of what it takes for you to support a candidate.
Yeah. So, but then we have to ask ourselves, so why are they using this sanction or this moral, uncompromising moral position? Why is that the excuse? And
It sounds
I,
so much cooler than I'm caving to the left.
well, yeah, it sounds like an intellectual, reason, but I think it might be in some cases, and you'd have to really look at someone's psychology to figure out what this really is. But it might be that they just aren't smart enough to figure out whether Trump is better than Harris, and so they don't know. And so if you're in a state of ignorance, but you want to have an opinion, then you just come up with some rationalistic excuse that sounds highfalutin, and that's your reason for not voting, or that's your reason for saying I'm a no for Trump, or and you just completely ignore the fact that this election is about choosing one candidate over another. You're just hyper focused on why you're not going to be for Trump.
And that's
And you just
another thing. They try to dance around. It's like, just because I'm not voting for Trump doesn't mean I'm backing Harris. It's like, you're kind of evading the nature of a two-party system.
well,
And
you're also being completely unhelpful. You're not part of the question. You're not giving anyone real information that will help them, because you're not comparing Trump to Harris. You're just saying, look at all the bad things about Trump. He's an
Mhm.
evil person. I could never support him. and then you just completely ignore Harris. So if you're sitting in Puerto Rico where you can't vote, and you're giving this advice that's totally useless for someone who's in the States who wants to make a decision. So if you're going to inject yourself into this election, at least give some helpful information in terms of a comparison between Trump and Harris, which is what Leonard did. So like I said before, Leonard's a completely breath of fresh air compared to what we're hearing from Yaron.
Absolutely. Well, in this more lighthearted moment, you wanted me to make sure to include Peikoff brings up Melania, but perhaps veers a little too close to the fire on the subject of older men with younger women.
Is there any other issue you think that's important that our viewers should know about why they should vote for Trump over Harris this time?
Melania seems like a nice woman. She's got the #1 book.
She does. Yeah. I guess it's #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. And it's the New York Times bestseller list.
What is it about? Do you remember?
I have no idea what her book is about.
I'm curious to read it. She's pretty too, I think.
Gorgeous. You're kidding? I'm not. Yeah.
And dignified too. Yeah,
right. Exactly.
So, but it says something for him if a woman like that would be attracted, unless he offered her, a fortune or I don't know what, to be queen of the world. But she seems like a nice person.
She does, and I think the press has been very unfair to her.
Yeah, I think that's a little ironic there. You notice he stopped himself before saying that a woman like that would be attracted. He didn't get through the word attracted, and then it comes into his mind that, well, maybe he offered her a fortune, and she wasn't attracted. And that kind of sounds like, maybe it's related to something going through his mind right now.
Valliant looks surprised.
His current relationship might have something to do with his way of thinking there. And Valliant just bursts out laughing, like he couldn't even control his laughter there.
Yeah.
So, I think, I'm sorry. Did you want to say something else?
No, go ahead.
So I was just to say on a more related point to the election, he's asked if he can think of any other reason to vote for Trump, and his mind goes to Melania, which would be like the last thing I would ever talk about, in terms of why you should support Trump.
It was a lighthearted moment. I mean, he was just riffing, but
it kind of goes to show that that's the one thing that he could think of, and so he's not coming up with a whole lot of originality here. Like I've pointed to Trump's sense of humor versus Harris's lack of any sense of humor. But you could also point to other things like her complete lack of qualifications to be commander in chief or to run the economy or do anything presidential, or meet with foreign leaders. Like, how is she going to get through conversations with foreign leaders? Is she going to have a teleprompter when she speaks to Putin or Xi or whoever she's talking to?
She's going to say, "I'm speaking." Gentlemen, I was raised in a middle-class family.
Yeah. It's just a horror show, in my opinion, if you start imagining how those conversations will go.
Yes.
But anyway, so I think that's an interesting, a little bit lighthearted moment.
Yeah. And he likes the ladies. What can I say? So at the end, Leonard speaks of Trump's errors of judgment.
He has errors of judgment. And I'm sure in some cases, he'll do something for publicity, but it won't be something that totally annihilates his viewpoint. He won't come out for the evil of American history in order to get publicity on CNN.
No. He very much defends the American.
So I just see, errors of judgment is a crucial moral term in the objectivist world. it means the person is basically good. You know, Rand said errors of judgment can be forgiven while breaches of morality cannot.
Right. And then that fits with the whole content of his article as well, where he was praising Trump mostly for he likes Trump and he thinks Trump has done a lot of good things and had successes for the country. So I think he's very generous towards Trump, saying that he makes errors of judgment, but and often that he says things he doesn't really mean in an emotional outburst, and then later he'll bring it down to reality. So he kind of understands that Trump is this braggart and emotionalist type who says stuff, but then has the ability to act on principle and listen to reason. So I think even though if you disagree with a lot of Trump policies and some of the concrete actions he's made, you can kind of understand where he's coming from. He's usually talking his whole way through it because the guy won't shut up. Uh, so you can at least understand his thinking. Um, and there's a whole journal of his thought on Twitter and wherever else he posts now, Truth Social or whatever. And then he gives speeches, and he gives these campaign speeches that go on, and he's willing to go off cuff and give his instant opinion about things. So he clearly can tell you what's on his mind, and if you listen to him for a long enough period of time, you will grow to understand the man, and you will probably grow to find him funny. I think he's funny. A lot of the times he's witty and can tell jokes off the cuff. And he's very relatable. So you kind of understand why he goes wrong when he goes wrong, and you understand why he's right when he's right.
Yeah. You know, I mean, again, I think you saw Valliant kind of, you know, if not leading him, at least going along with what he's saying. And, you know, I there's a lot going on that you could unpack there, but the crazier truth is I'm just happy Valliant is being more open to arguments from the right. And I'm, you know, good for him. And on that same note, I also have had issues with Razi in the past, but kudos to him and Ayn Rand Center UK for giving Peikoff a platform. You know,
Well,
ARI is running his personal site.
I hope this marks a turning point for Ayn Rand Center UK and for James Valliant. I've had issues with them in the past. I think that they need to take a step back and check their premises. And maybe this is an indication of that, you know, them giving a voice to Leonard. So I see it as a good sign. I don't completely understand why James is doing this, but I hope it's for the best. And
I
I hope,
I can believe that Peikoff genuinely persuaded him. Maybe it's, you know, Valiant's loyalty to him that made him open to that, but that's a noble way for it to happen.
well, they clearly had a good relationship in the past where Leonard gave him access to Ayn Rand's diaries, and then he wrote his book. So I hope that, you know, this goodwill between them continues and we get more content from Leonard. Um, I just hope for the best. I hope it goes well.
Yeah. The election as well. So let's hope you, me, and Leonard are happy with the result.
Yeah, vote for Trump. It's crucial. This
Exactly.
Western civilization will end if you don't vote for Trump.
You're gonna get us demonetized or de-amplified at the very least. But any final thoughts, William?
Well, we started talking about um, apologizing for taking a stand. You like starting off with the things you hate about Trump and then
Right.
saying why you like him. I just want to make a pitch here for not doing that. Don't begin, you know, promoting someone by apologizing for what you're going to say. Like if you support a candidate, even if you support Harris, I don't care. Tell me all the good things about Harris. And don't tell me up front why you hate her. I don't care why you hate her. I know why you should hate her. And
I mean,
I know why people don't like Trump. Okay. I mean, sometimes it's TDS related and then it's absurd. But for the reasonable people who don't like Trump, I understand. I get it. But I'm not going to begin every time I try to promote Trump with a disclaimer or apology. I'm trying to persuade you. So I think this comes from this idea of sanctioning someone. You don't want to fully sanction Trump or have the appearance that you fully support him, but nobody who listens to you is going to think that. Nobody thinks that just because you support Trump and are going to vote for him, that you believe he's God or Jesus or something and walks
right.
on water. That's
I,
not what your audience is going to pick up.
I just think
They
it's valid to vote against someone, even if it's not ideal. I mean, as much as I do support Trump, or even I was backing DeSantis in the primary, I mean, the ugly truth is, and maybe this makes me a tribalist, that I probably would hold my nose and vote for Mitt Romney if he was the candidate, just because I didn't want the wokies to win.
Okay, well, if that's your purpose, if that's the point of your conversation, then I guess it's okay. I'm just concerned about talking down to your audience. And like if you support Trump, but you start with an apology, then you're talking down to your audience because they don't need to hear that. You should talk to the audience you want to persuade. You should talk to an audience who understands that you're not a total sycophant, and you're just giving a pitch for Trump. You know, I think a reasonable audience understands that, and they're not dumbasses. You should not try to talk to the dumbasses in your audience. Talk to the smart people who will understand that you're giving the best case for Trump.
Oh, there was one thing where, Yaron came out with his case against Trump yesterday. Yaron is saying that he wants to hear from other people that are supporting Trump and get their best reasons to prove that it's not TDS. And it's just like, you kicked most of your consistent Trump supporters off of your chat in the last 12 months. Now you want to hear from the ones that are left? Oh, that's real honest.
I know I kind of picked up on that. I think I tuned into one of his shows and he was saying something about that. So I think if you really want to hear from your critics, why are you banning them? You know, you banned me and Scott, who are your best critics, and now you're complaining that you're not hearing what you want to hear from your critics.
He wants critics he can handle.
Well, he wants critics who won't show him up, who won't prove him wrong.
Great. Well, I we talked about a lot of really good stuff. We've got a bunch of good shows coming up on tribalism. We've got some great guests. And boy, I'll be honest, I'm anxious about the election. I hope it goes our way. But I'm in the meantime, I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig. This is the Ayn Rand Fan Club, and we'll see you next time post-election.